My name is Marcus Elliott Reeves. I'm 34 years old, and last Saturday, I sat at a banquet table in a rented hall on the corner of Dunmore Avenue in Callaway, Ohio, population 11,200, surrounded by every person who had ever told me I would amount to nothing. There were 41 of them. Cousins, uncles, aunts, my mother's sisters, my father's brothers, neighbors who had known me since I was 9 years old, all of them dressed in their best. All of them smiling. All of them watching me. And before dinner was served, someone asked me to share what I'd been up to. So I did. I pulled out a single piece of paper, unfolded it once, and read one number aloud. Just one. No preamble, no performance. Just the number. $4,200,000. My net worth as of the previous Tuesday. The room went so quiet I could hear the ice in someone's glass settle. Before I tell you how I got to that table, or what happened after, there's something I need you to understand first. Something I carried for 11 years that I haven't told anyone fully. Not even the people in that room. There's a small white envelope sitting on my kitchen counter right now. It has slanted handwriting on the front. My name in my mother's hand. I'll get to it. But first, let me take you back to where this actually started. Before I get into what happened in that hall on Dunmore Avenue, please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if this story actually means something to you. Drop 2 words in the comments that describe the family you grew up in. I want to know where you're listening from tonight. Let me take you back to the winter of 2009. Callaway, Ohio, population 11,200. The kind of place where the hardware store has been open since 1954, and nobody thinks that's remarkable. The Reeves family had a tradition every December 26th, the day after Christmas. My grandmother, Elaine Ruth Reeves, would host what she called the continuation dinner. The idea was simple. Christmas was for thanks, December 26th was for plans. You sat at the table and you told the family what you were going to do next, what you were building, what you were working toward. It was meant to be encouraging. In practice, it was a tribunal. I was 18 years old. I had just finished my first semester at Harwick Community College, not because I chose it, but because it was the only school my father had agreed to pay for. He had a philosophy about higher education that he stated plainly: real men build things. Degrees are for people who can't. He had said it so many times it had its own rhythm in our house, like a prayer. My older brother, Derek James Reeves, was 23. He had just been promoted to shift supervisor at the Callaway Metals plant. My cousin, Terrell Vincent Reeves, had a union card and a new truck. These were the benchmarks. These were the men my father pointed to. I was studying business. I didn't tell anyone that directly. When they asked what I was taking, I said general studies, because the last time I mentioned business, my Uncle Royce had laughed so hard he choked on his food. The table that night seated 14. The smell of pot roast and something burnt underneath it. The overhead light flickered once every 6 minutes. I know because I counted. I needed something to count. I had brought something to share. A business concept, 12 pages, typed and printed at the Harwick Library. A proposal for a small logistics coordination service, connecting local suppliers with small retailers in the Tri-County area. It was rough. I was 18, but I'd worked on it for 63 days. I waited until the dessert plates were out. I thought that was smart. Full stomachs, lighter moods. I said, I have something I want to show the family. My father, Gerald Wayne Reeves, put down his fork without looking at me. He didn't say anything. He just put down his fork. My mother, Sandra Lee Reeves, smiled and said, "Oh, that's sweet, Marcus." The word sweet landed like a small, clean knife. I put the 12 pages on the table. My Aunt Cheryl Haynes glanced at them and then glanced at her husband. My cousin Terrell picked up the top page, looked at it for 3 seconds and put it back. My grandmother Elaine looked at me, just at me, with an expression I didn't know how to read until years later. Not pity, not pride, something that looked more like recognition. My father picked up the pages. He read the first paragraph. Then he set them down, face down, and said the sentence that I have carried in my chest like a stone for 16 years. The boy always did like to play pretend. He said it to the table. Not to me, to the table. The room laughed. Not all of them, but enough. Derek laughed. Uncle Royce laughed. Terrell shook his head slowly like he was watching someone miss an obvious shot. My mother's smile didn't change, but it stopped reaching her eyes. My grandmother did not laugh. She was the only one. 3 people said nothing, just sat. my Aunt Loretta Wyatt, my cousin Dana, who was 15, and a family friend named Phil Garner, who had been coming to these dinners for 12 years and had never once offered an opinion about anything. Their silence was its own kind of verdict. It told me that what was happening was normal, that no one would stop it, that this was just how it was. I folded the 12 pages, I put them in my jacket pocket, I ate the rest of my dessert, and I did not speak again for the remainder of the evening. That was December 26, 2009. It did not stop there. It never stops with just one dinner. Over the next 3 years, Gerald Wayne Reeves developed what I can only describe as a public performance of disappointment. It was refined, it was practiced, it had its own language and its own audience, and the audience was always the family, always in a group, never one-on-one. He would tilt his head when he talked about me to other people, a small sad tilt. He would say things like, "Marcus has his own ideas," in the same tone someone uses to say their dog won't stop chewing furniture. He would dab at the corner of his eye when someone asked how I was doing, which made people feel sorry for him before they'd even asked what was wrong. He cried, just slightly, at Terrell's engagement party when someone mentioned that Terrell had built his own porch. He cried because Terrell had built something, with his hands. The implication was its own complete sentence. At 21, I was still at Harwick. Still studying. I had also, without telling anyone, taken a second job at a freight coordination company in Kessler Township, a 40-minute drive, where I was learning from the inside exactly how supply chain management worked at the small business level. I made $11.40 an hour. I took notes on everything. My father found out through Derek, who had seen my car in the Kessler Township lot. He didn't ask me about it. Instead, at Sunday dinner, he mentioned to my mother, while I was in the room, that it must be nice to have time to drive around doing nothing useful. He said it the way you'd say it about a stranger, not your son, a stranger who happened to live in your house. I looked at him, and I said very quietly, "I'm learning how freight routing works. I'm going to use it." He looked at the television. The television was off. Okay, Marcus, sure you are." That was the last conversation we had in that house where I tried to explain myself. 6 weeks later, I packed a single gray suitcase, a hard-shell Samsonite with a broken wheel that dragged, and I put $840 in a bank envelope in the inner pocket. I booked a one-way bus ticket to Columbus. The ticket cost $18. The bus left at 5:15 in the morning. I left a note on the kitchen counter, 3 sentences. The third one said I would be in touch when I had something real to say. I did not slam the door. I pulled it closed the same way I always had, making sure the latch caught. I had done it 10,000 times. One more time didn't feel different, but it was Columbus, January 2012. $840, one suitcase, no credit history, and a phone with a cracked screen that I held together with a rubber band. The first place I slept was a shared room at the Ridgeline Hostel on Parsons Avenue. $22 a night, 4 beds to a room, the smell of bleach, and someone else's laundry. I stayed 12 nights. I ate from a bodega 2 blocks away, peanut butter, crackers, coffee in a paper cup that cost $1.10, and which I treated like a full meal. I found work in 9 days. A logistics firm called Tribridge Freight Partners, small operation, 7 employees, run by a man named Owen Calloway, no relation to the town. He needed someone to handle invoice reconciliation and vendor follow-up. He was paying $13.75 an hour. I said yes before he finished the sentence. I slept on an air mattress in a studio apartment on Bryden Road for 14 months. The ceiling had a crack shaped like a river delta. I know because I stared at it most mornings before my 5:45 alarm. I kept a notebook on the floor beside the mattress. I filled it with ideas, then I filled a second one. I didn't talk to anyone in Callaway for 8 months. No calls, no texts, no social media. Radio silence complete and chosen. The invisible costs were something nobody tells you about. There was no emergency contact on my health insurance form at Tribridge. I wrote NA and moved on, but it sat wrong for days. In February, I had a bad flu. Fever of 103.4, 2 days in the studio alone, and there was no one to call. Not because I had no one in the world, but because the people I could have called were the same people who had taught me that what I wanted didn't matter. There were no birthday calls. I turned 22 in March. I bought myself a slice of carrot cake from the bakery on 5th Street. It cost $3.80. I ate it at the kitchen counter. The hardest invisible cost was knowing with certainty that a story was being told about me in Callaway, in kitchens and parking lots, and at the December 26th dinner I was no longer attending. A story in which I had failed or cracked or proved everyone right. I couldn't correct it. I couldn't respond to it. It was happening in a room I could no longer enter, and it was using my name. But here is what no contact gave me. It gave me Tuesday mornings. 6 months in, I woke up on a Tuesday, 5:43 a.m. before the alarm, and I lay on the air mattress and I noticed something. Something was missing. I had to lie still for a full minute before I understood what it was. My father's voice. The version of his voice that lived in my head. The one that said, play pretend and sure you are, and meme. The one that ran underneath everything I tried to do like static underneath a radio station. It was gone. Not forever. But gone that morning. I lay there for 20 minutes without moving. Not because I was lazy, because I wanted to memorize what quiet felt like. Then I got up, made coffee, opened the notebook, started working. That was the first morning of the rest of everything. The first person outside my family who treated me like a person was Owen Calloway's office manager, a woman named Brenda Solis. She was 53 years old, had read every book on the shelf behind her desk twice, and on my third week of work, she slid a printed article across my desk, a piece on micro-logistics startups in the Midwest, and said, "This made me think of you. Don't ask me why, it just did." She didn't want credit, she didn't want a conversation about it. She just gave it to me and went back to her desk. That article sat on my kitchen counter for 60 days. I read it 11 times. If you're still here, hit that subscribe button, because this story is about to get a lot more complicated. What happens next is not what I expected either. There was no montage. Just alarm clocks and spreadsheets and falling asleep with a textbook open on my chest. 2012 became 2013. I saved $6,200 working at Tribridge. I spent $4,000 of it on a night school certificate program in supply chain management at Columbus State. I took the bus to class 3 nights a week. I ate dinner on the bus, usually a granola bar, sometimes a sandwich I'd packed at 5 a.m. The bus smelled like exhaust in someone's takeout, and I did my homework in that smell, and I didn't think about it as sacrifice. I thought of it as information gathering. Everything was information gathering. In 2014, Owen Calloway promoted me to operations coordinator. My salary became $48,000. The year before, it had been $29,000. I rented a proper apartment on the east side of Columbus. I bought a mattress, a real one, off a metal frame. And the first morning I woke up on it, I lay there for 10 minutes thinking, quietly, that I had done something. In 2015, I took out a $12,000 small business loan and registered Meridian Freight Consulting, LLC. I worked at Tribridge during the day. I worked on Meridian at night and on weekends. My first client was a printing company in Worthington that was hemorrhaging money on last-mile delivery costs. I fixed their routing in 6 weeks. I saved them $34,000 in the first quarter. They referred me to 2 other businesses. Those 2 referred me to 4 more. There was no montage. That is important to understand. There was no swelling moment. Just invoices and contracts and 3 a.m. spreadsheets and coffee that had gone cold 2 hours ago and me not moving because I wasn't done. In 2016, I met Owen Calloway for dinner. A real dinner, not a lunch at his desk, at a steakhouse on High Street called Pemberton's. He ordered the same thing he always ordered, and he looked at me across the table and said something I wasn't prepared for. "Marcus, you're the hungriest person I've ever employed." And I mean that exactly. Not desperate. Hungry. There's a difference. Desperate people take anything. Hungry people build towards something specific. You always knew what specific thing you were building toward. "I want to know what it is." I told him all of it. Meridian, the plan, the clients, the next phase. He listened without moving. Then he said, "I'll be your first investor if you ever need one. No pressure, just the offer." Then he ate his steak. He never rescinded that offer. 2 years later, I took him up on it. He put in $80,000. He never once told me what to do with it. In 2017, I hired my first employee. Her name was Priya Mehta, 26 years old, sharp as cut glass, and carrying her own version of exile. She had walked out of a finance role at a Columbus consulting firm after her senior manager had taken credit for 18 months of her work. She had taken nothing with her except her reputation and her contacts list, both of which were formidable. She found Meridian through a mutual referral, came in for one meeting, and looked at me at the end of it and said, "Are you actually building this or are you performing building it?" I said, "Both. Come find out." She started the following Monday. Our bonding moment did not happen over a celebration. It happened 6 weeks in when we both stayed until 11 p.m., sorting out a vendor dispute that could have cost us our 3rd largest client. We fixed it. We sat in silence for a while after, drinking cold coffee, neither of us saying anything. Then she said, "You know, no one in my family thinks this is a real job." I said, "Mine either." We didn't talk about it again. We didn't need to. I'll tell you now so you understand the full picture. Priya Mehta eventually became the chief operating officer of Meridian Freight Consulting. She built the systems infrastructure that allowed us to scale. Her name is on the wall of the office. First thing you see when you walk in. Something I carried from Callaway, the thing that actually became an asset. I check everything twice. Every contract, every invoice, every number, every clause. I don't trust first readings. I grew up in a house where the story changed depending on who was telling it, and I learned early that the first version is almost never complete. I look for the gap between the first version and the true version. In business, that gap is where the money is. In life, it's where the protection is. That instinct alone saved Meridian $217,000 in a single contract dispute in 2019. I caught a rounding error in a vendor agreement that had been designed, I believe, though I can't prove it, to compound over 18 months into something catastrophic. I caught it in the third reading. The second reading, I had almost missed it, and then there was the white envelope. I had carried it since 2012. I found it on the kitchen counter the morning I left Callaway next to my note. My mother had left it at some point in the night. She must have heard me packing and said nothing, just slipped a letter under my name in her slanted cursive and gone back to bed. I put it in the outer pocket of the gray suitcase and I did not open it. I moved it from the suitcase to a shoebox, from the shoebox to a desk drawer, from a desk drawer in the Brighton Road studio to a desk drawer in the East Columbus apartment to a drawer in the Meridian office, where it sat for 3 years. I opened it on the morning of January 3rd, 2022. 10 years almost exactly after I had left. Inside was a single index card, my mother's handwriting. 4 sentences. The first said, "I know this is wrong." The second said, "I don't know how to make it right while I'm inside it." The third said, "You are not what they say you are." The fourth said, "Come back to me when you're ready, not before." I sat with that index card for 40 minutes. I thought about the 18-year-old who had carried it for 10 years without opening it. I thought about what it would have meant to him to read it the morning he got on the bus. Then I thought about what it meant to me now, at 31, reading it with $1.6 million in the business bank account and Priya in the next room, and a company that employed 14 people. It reframed everything. Not by changing what happened, but by showing me that one person in that room had been watching, and had known, and had been unable to say it out loud, and had said it on an index card at 3 a.m. instead. That is its own kind of courage, not the kind I would have chosen. But I had to decide whether I was going to hold it against her or understand it for what it was. I decided to understand it. I didn't go looking for the moment they found out. It found itself. In September 2022, Meridian Freight Consulting was featured in a piece in the Columbus Business Journal, one of those profile pieces that runs with a photo and a pull quote and a headline that says something like, "Quiet Disruptor." I had not sent it to anyone in Callaway. I had not posted it anywhere. I didn't think about it as something they would see. It was a regional business publication in a city 130 miles away from a town where people read the Callaway Gazette and not much else. But someone Googled my name. I don't know who did it first. I know someone did, because of what came next. The first voicemail came on a Wednesday at 7:18 p.m. My Uncle Royce. His voice was bright and warm in a way I had never heard it directed at me before. He said, "Marcus, it's your uncle. I just wanted to reach out. We've been thinking about you. Give me a call when you get a chance, brother." He called me brother. He had called me the boy for the first 21 years of my life. The second came Thursday morning. My cousin Terrell. He left 3.5 minutes of message that opened with, "Man, I always knew you had something in you," which was so untrue that I had to sit down when I heard it. He talked about a business idea he had. He mentioned casually that he'd had a rough year at the plant. He mentioned a number, $18,000, in a way that was not casual at all. The third was from my Aunt Cheryl Haynes. She wanted to tell me she had always been in my corner, that she had said so at the time to everyone. This was not true. She was one of the people who had looked at my 12 pages and then looked at her husband. The fourth was from Derek, my brother. He didn't say much. His message was 40 seconds long. He said he'd been meaning to call. He said he was proud of me. His voice cracked slightly on the word proud, and I couldn't tell if it was genuine or if it was strategy. I still can't. I may never be able to. The fifth was from my father. Gerald Wayne Reeves had not spoken to me in 11 years. His voice was older, slower. He said, "Son, it's your dad." Long pause. I wanted to say. Another pause. "I think you've done well. The message cut off. He had run out of recording time. He didn't call back. I listened to all 5 voicemails in a row, once, sitting in the parking garage beneath the Meridian office at 9 p.m. Then I put the phone in the cup holder and I sat with my hands in my lap for a while. Not one of them said I'm sorry, not one. They called because they saw the article. They called because there was a number attached to my name now that made them see me differently. They did not call to repair anything. They called because the math had changed. I drove home. I made dinner. I did not return any of the calls. 3 months later, I received an invitation to the Reeves family reunion, annual gathering, this time at the Dunmore Event Center on Dunmore Avenue in Callaway. My grandmother Elaine was turning 82. The invitation was sent to my office address. Someone had looked it up, and it came in a cream-colored card with my full name written in unfamiliar cursive. Not my mother's. Someone else had addressed it. I called my mother the same evening I received it. It was the first time I had called her in 4 years. She picked up on the second ring. She didn't say hello. She said Marcus. Just that, like she had been expecting the call and was relieved it had finally come. We talked for 27 minutes. I told her I had read the index card. She went quiet for a long moment. Then she said, I meant every word. I said I believed her. She didn't ask me to forgive her. She asked if I would come to the reunion for Grandma Elaine. I said I'd think about it. I called back 4 days later and said yes. I drove from Columbus to Callaway on a Saturday in December. 3 hours and 12 minutes. I wore a plain dark suit, no tie. I brought one thing, a folded piece of paper in my inner breast pocket. The Dunmore Event Center is a beige building with a drop ceiling and round tables that seat 8. The lighting is fluorescent, and there are fake flowers in glass vases that have been there since at least 2008. I know because I had been to events in that room before. It smelled exactly the same as it always had, like candles that had been blown out an hour ago. I arrived 11 minutes late, intentionally. I wanted to walk into a room that was already full, 41 people, tables arranged in a horseshoe, my grandmother Elaine at the center table, wearing a purple dress, her hair pinned up the same way she had worn it for 60 years. She saw me before anyone else did. She didn't wave, she just nodded once, slowly, like she was confirming something to herself. My father saw me from across the room. He was sitting at the far end of the horseshoe. He was wearing a blue shirt I had never seen before. He looked older than I'd imagined him in my head. That's always how it is. The version of a person you carry stays the age they were when you left. Gerald Wayne Reeves was 61 years old now. His hair was mostly gray. He looked at me, and then he looked at the table in front of him, and then he looked back at me, and then he very deliberately rearranged the spoon beside his plate. His first instinct, even then, was audience management. I watched him scan the room to see who had noticed that I'd walked in. He was calculating the optics, even now. Even here, I made the rounds. I hugged my grandmother. I hugged my mother. I said polite, specific things to the uncles and aunts and cousins who had left voicemails. I did not bring up the voicemails. I did not let any conversation become the conversation. I was doing my job, which was to be present and steady and completely, utterly unreadable. Dinner was served. Pot roast, rolls, green beans with almonds, the same things we had always eaten at these tables. The overhead light did not flicker. I noticed because I was still the kind of person who notices that kind of thing. After the main course, my Uncle Royce, because of course it was Royce, stood up and said he thought it might be nice for everyone to share what they'd been up to this year. A callback to the old continuation dinner format. He said it like it was a spontaneous idea. He had been watching me since I walked in. It was not spontaneous. When he got to me, he said, "And of course, Marcus, seems like you've been busy." He smiled his warmest smile. The audience laughed lightly. I recognized the mechanics of the moment. It was an invitation to perform, to entertain them with my success in a way that made them feel part of it, in a way that made them feel they had contributed. I reached into my jacket pocket. I took out the folded piece of paper. I unfolded it once. I said, I've been building a company called Meridian Freight Consulting. We're headquartered in Columbus. As of last Tuesday, my personal net worth is $4,200,000. I said it the way you read a meter. Steady, flat, factual. The room was silent in a way I'd not heard a room be silent before. Not the silence of shock exactly, the silence of 41 people simultaneously recalculating something. I let it sit for 7 full seconds. I counted, then I said, I built it alone from a studio apartment in Columbus, starting with $840 and a broken suitcase. I want to say that not to impress anyone, but because I think it's important to name where things actually start. Real things start small, they start quiet. They start when everyone else has already decided they won't work. I folded the paper, I put it back in my pocket. I looked at my grandmother Elaine. She was already looking at me. That night, after most people had moved to the other end of the hall, my father crossed the room toward me. He walked slowly. He had a full glass of water he didn't drink from. He said, Marcus, I owe you. I said, you don't need to do this here. My brother Derek appeared at my right elbow. He said, we've missed you, man. We want you back in the family, whatever it takes. I looked at him and said, I know. My Uncle Royce appeared on my left. He said, "Your father always believed in you, you know that. He just had a hard way of showing." I said, "Royce, I know what he had." My cousin Terrell was standing 6 feet away, hands in his pockets. He caught my eye. He didn't say anything. He just gave a small, tight nod. That was the most honest moment of the evening. I said one more thing before I walked out. I said it quietly, facing slightly away from everyone toward the exit. Not dramatic, just true. I needed someone to believe I wasn't playing pretend. I found those people. I'm grateful for them. That's the whole story. I walked out steady. I walked out even. I did not look back at the room. That night, from the parking lot of a gas station on Route 40 between Callaway and Columbus, I sent one email to the family distribution list that had been used to send the reunion invitation. The email was short. It said, "I will not be returning calls or messages that are about my business or my finances. If anyone wants to rebuild something on honest terms, they know how to reach me. The door is not closed, but it is not open the way it was." Below my name, I typed one line, the street address of the Meridian office, so they knew where to find me if they chose to. Then I drove home. The highway was empty. The radio played something low and instrumental. I drove in the left lane at a steady 71 miles per hour, and I let the dark run out behind me. I did not orchestrate what happened next. I want to be precise about that. What the Reeves family did with what I had put in the room, I had no hand in any of it. Within 2 weeks of the reunion, the version of events began to circulate in Callaway in the way things circulate in small towns, through church parking lots and Tuesday lunch tables and text threads between cousins. The version going around was not my version. It was a version assembled from 41 different vantage points, filtered through 41 different needs, and what emerged from it was something I couldn't have planned even if I'd wanted to. Gerald Wayne Reeves, I was told by my cousin Dana, 15 at the flashback dinner, now a 28-year-old teacher in Kessler Township who had called me directly, plainly, without an agenda, had been holding himself up in the family as an example of a hard-minded realist. A man who had called it right. The one who had seen that Marcus had his head in the clouds and had said so, and had been proven wise by the years. That story Gerald had been telling for over a decade. After the reunion, that story stopped working. You can't be the man who knew his son was foolish when his son's net worth has 7 figures. The math cancels the narrative. Gerald lost something, not his family, not his standing exactly, but a role, the role of the man who had been right. He had built his identity inside that role for 11 years. Watching it dissolve, even from a distance, was not a clean or satisfying thing to witness. It was just something that happened the way ice melts, without drama, without ceremony. Uncle Roy stopped telling the story of the December 26th dinner the way he'd been telling it. Terrell stopped saying he'd always believed in me. Enough people had been at the reunion to contradict it. My Aunt Cheryl Haynes sent me a card, a physical card, in the mail to the Meridian office. She said she was sorry for not speaking up. She said it in 9 sentences, and none of them made excuses. I put the card in the desk drawer where the white envelope used to live. Dana called me on a Sunday afternoon in February. She had left Callaway at 22, moved to Kessler, become a teacher. She said, "I was 15 at that dinner. I've thought about it a lot. I should have said something. I don't know what a 15-year-old could have said, but I've thought about it." I told her that wasn't on her. She said, "I know, I needed to say it anyway." My brother Derek and I have had 2 real conversations since the reunion. Not performances, not negotiations, real ones. In the second one, he said, "I thought if I agreed with Dad, I was safe. I didn't think about what it cost you." I didn't tell him it was okay. I said, "I know. We haven't resolved it. There are still things unsaid. I am not in a hurry." And my mother, Sandra Lee Reeves, she and I have spoken every Sunday since January. For 30 minutes, sometimes more. She tells me about her week. I tell her about mine. We don't talk about Gerald. We don't talk about December 26, 2009. We talk about other things. It is new and it is fragile, and I am treating it carefully, the way you treat something you don't want to break again. In March of this year, Meridian Freight Consulting launched the Elaine Ruth Reeves Business Access Fund. My grandmother's full name, her idea in a way. She was the one who had sat at that dinner table and not laughed. She was the one who had looked at me with something other than dismissal. She never said a word that night. But she was the only one who understood that a word wasn't what I needed. Presence was what I needed. Someone to not laugh. That was the whole of her gift. The fund provides $5,000 microgrants to first-generation entrepreneurs in the Tri-County area. People who are building something from nothing, with no family capital behind them and no one in their corner who has done it before. No pitch decks required, no panel of judges, just a written statement, 2 pages describing what they're building and why. Brenda Solis, now retired from Tribridge, agreed to chair the review committee. Priya Mehta built the application system in a week. The first cohort was 8 people. The youngest was 22. The oldest was 47. Every single one of them had a family member, somewhere, who had told them it was a bad idea. I shook all of their hands. I looked each of them in the eye. I did not give a speech. I said, "You already know what you're doing. We're just adding fuel." Last Thursday, I had dinner at my apartment. A real dinner. Not a business dinner, not a reunion, just a Thursday. Priya was there. Her fiancé, a quiet architect named James, who laughs at things that are actually funny and not at things he's supposed to. Owen Calloway came. He is 71 now and still drives himself and still orders the same thing at every restaurant. Dana drove up from Kessler Township and brought a bottle of red wine that cost $9 and apologized for it. I told her not to. The wine was good, the plates don't match. I've owned this apartment for 4 years and I still haven't bought a matching set. There's the blue plate from Target, the 2 cream ones from a thrift store on Brighton Road, the small green one I've had since Columbus State. We eat off all of them. Nobody cares. We sat at the table for 3 hours. We talked about work and James's current project and a movie nobody had seen but everyone had opinions about. Dana told a story about one of her students that made Owen laugh so hard he had to put down his fork. We did not talk about Calloway. We did not talk about reunions or voicemails or the distance between what families say and what they mean. At one point, Priya looked around the table and said, to no one in particular, "This is a good table." She meant the people. She meant the evening. She meant the whole complicated assembled thing. I thought about a table where the overhead light flickered, where the food smelled of pot roast and something burnt beneath it, where a boy put 12 typed pages down in front of people who loved him and had them placed face down within seconds. I didn't say any of that. I just passed the bread and refilled the wine and stayed in the room. That's the whole work of it. Staying in the room you chose. If you're still listening, I want to say something directly to you. You may know this story, not the specific facts of it, not the freight company or the bus ticket or the $840, but the shape of it. The specific geometry of being inside a room full of people who love you and feeling entirely alone inside that love because the love comes attached to conditions you can't meet. Because the love says, be smaller, be quieter, agree with us, don't reach past what we've decided is the ceiling. You may know the words they use. Dreamer, difficult, ungrateful, too big for your boots, playing pretend, head in the clouds, doesn't know what hard work is, thinks they're better than everyone. Think about those words for a moment. Think about what they all have in common. Every single one of them is about size. Every single one says, shrink. And I want you to understand that those words, the specific sting of them, the fact that they come from people whose opinion you were taught to trust before you knew anything else, those words are not a diagnosis. They are the sound a story makes when it's losing control of itself. When someone built a narrative about you, who you are, what you're capable of, what your ceiling is, and you started to outgrow it, those words are panic dressed up as wisdom. That's all they are. You are not what the table decided. You are what you build after you leave it. The one thing I would add, and this took me 11 years to understand, is that leaving the table is not the same as winning. Winning is not the point. The point is building something true. Something that would have existed whether or not anyone was watching. Something you would have done even if that Columbus Business Journal article had never run. Something you would have kept building even if no one ever called build that thing. It doesn't matter if they see it. It matters that it's real. Here's the question I want to leave you with tonight. And I want you to be honest when you answer it, even if you're just answering it to yourself. If your family called you tomorrow, after years of silence, what do you think they'd say? Help me, or I'm sorry. Drop it in the comments. Don't filter it. I read every single one, usually late at night when the office is quiet. I want to know what you're sitting with. If this story meant something to you, subscribe. There are more of them coming. Stories about people who built something real from a place where nothing was supposed to grow. I'll see you in the next one. Thank you for listening.